Hello and welcome to the Special Needs Sibling Podcast, where we talk about what life is really like as a sibling to someone with special needs. I'm your host Charlene, and today our guest is Tucker. Yeah.
Hey,
Um.
how's it going?
Cool. Well, thank you for being on the podcast. We had met. Oh, I don't even know how long it's been now. Like
It's been
8
quite a few
years.
years.
Yeah, it's been
Yeah,
a
something like
while.
that.
Yeah. So we had met a few years back, and then we kind of only stayed in touch like when we saw each other in person. So this is like the first time we've talked since being in person and stuff and like online. But that is the power of technology for you. Yeah.
Indeed.
All right. So if you could lay out your family structure in terms of like birth order, siblings you have, and siblings with a disability.
Yeah, 100%. So I come from a big family. There is six of us, sibling wise, and then my two parents, so eight in total. And the four oldest are biological, and then the younger two are adopted and both have special needs. So I'm the oldest of all six. I'm 20, almost 26. And then I have a sister who's 24, and then another sister who's 20, a brother who is almost 18. And those are the four biological. And then my two siblings that are adopted with special needs. One of them is 16, and then she has Down syndrome and like some autistic traits. And then or I guess autistic characteristics, whatever, something like that. And then my
Yeah.
brother, my brother, he's 13 years old, and he has Down syndrome as well, and then kind of the same thing as my sister, like some autistic characteristics, behaviors, and things like that as well. They both have some other health things too, but yeah,
Cool. And then they're not biologically related, right? Like they're come from two separate families also, right?
correct. Yeah, they're both come from separate families.
Okay. Cool. That
Yeah,
that's a lot of people. But that which is
is
cool for me to see cuz it's just me and my sister, so it's yeah.
right, right. Yes. So there's always a party at our house. So.
Yeah. For sure. Um so on this podcast the idea is kind of like open forum type of thing. So was there anything that you wanted to bring up or like talk about or like that you thought was interesting or wanted to ask on the podcast?
I mean, I can't think of anything at the moment. So if you have like the questions you want to ask, and then if I can always like, if it's okay, pop in with something if something comes up in my head, or if I think of something at the end.
Yeah, for sure. We can definitely do that.
I mean, I could
So
be on
again,
here hours,
yeah,
telling stories and stuff, but I don't think you want that. So
yeah, not forever, but yeah, there's definitely one of those like we'll just see how it goes and things like that. So I guess we can start with growing up like with your siblings when you were younger. I guess when you were all younger versus like now, kind of like more as you're an adult, they're all a little bit older. Like, kind of what was the difference in you interacting with them when they were like first adopted versus like right now?
yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think when we were definitely younger, um, and I think we've always been a really really tight family unit. And we've always been kind of each other's cheerleaders. So I would say from a pretty young age until maybe, trying to think, because we adopted my first sibling with special needs, uh, 17 years ago. And my brain is tired, so I can't do the math in my head at the moment. But I mean, I was fairly young, and so from like that age, I was super stoked to get a new sister. I didn't really care too much about the special needs aspect or anything like that. I was just excited to get a new sister. And so from like that point until maybe like I don't know, I would say maybe mid-teens or whatever, I had a super good relationship with my sister and brother with special needs, and I love both of them. I had you know many many stories that I could tell you about fun, exciting things that we did together, and just the way that they looked up to me as the older brother made me feel
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, like even when my sister was in the hospital for like months, I like shaved her initials in my head, and I was like super proud of that. But then I think like as I started getting a little bit older into like my mid and late teens, I think I started kind of like slightly bummed about it. But I think that's just kind of what happens as you get older. You start to like notice certain things. So I noticed, some of my friends, like the way that they looked at my siblings and the way that they treated me. And I noticed, just
Mm-hmm.
even people on the outside treating my siblings different. And then I also like kind of realized that how much I had missed out on, I guess, like as uh just like, in middle school and then in high school. I mean, I was homeschooled, so I didn't obviously have as much stuff as maybe your typical um public schooler, but
Mm-hmm.
still I missed out on certain things like sleepovers or family vacations or all these things just because my family couldn't do any of that stuff just with
Yeah.
my siblings and some of the health conditions they had. So I think there was kind of like a moment of a few years where I kind of like had a little bit of resentment towards my parents for not really being like letting me do certain things. And like I never like hated my siblings at all, but it was definitely like a period of time where I was just kind of like, I don't know. I just kind of felt like embarrassed by them a little bit, and like, the
Mm-hmm.
fact that, I was looked at different because of that, and the fact that I couldn't do certain things. And then I kind of grew out of that, and I think I realized that how much each of them grew me as an individual, and how they've taught me so many things. Um, simple things like enjoying like the small moments in life, or being content where you are, greeting everyone with a smile on your face, being open to listening to other people because you never know when someone might be having a bad day, just like random things like that. And I think it was kind of more until like my late teens, early 20s, like 19, 20, 21, when I kind of turned around from that like phase of like kind of embarrassment or resentment. And like there's still moments, where I kind of like am embarrassed by certain things, but for the most part, like it doesn't really phase me as much anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it makes me feel pretty special thinking that like, because they both think that I don't want to like, publicly brag or anything, but I think that they kind of, think of me as like their hero. So I'm like, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, no, for sure. As the oldest brother, like I think there's a certain level of like that's totally acceptable. Like that that totally makes sense. Yeah. No, yeah, it's interesting. Like I have this like hypothesis that I came up with a long time ago, and it's interesting as I've talked to people about it because it's this hypothesis about like it's just a big roller coaster like for all siblings because there's just like we love them so much and there's just then we just hate other things around them because it's like the outside world makes us feel bad about what's happening but it's like it's not that bad but it's just like peer pressure and stuff and then there's relationships with our parents which is like an up and down thing too and so it's this tidal wave because I remember when I kind of had the same thing when in my early 20s where I was like there was like a whole mental shift of like like this part of my life was hard but like I love my sister so much like it doesn't
Mm.
kind of matter how much pain
Yeah.
there was. Yeah, so it'll be interesting like cuz I'm older than you and so it'll be interesting like as you get older like how that evolves just cuz
Mm.
for me like after I hit that early 20s then I had met my husband and we got married. So then that changes like a whole other dynamic of interacting with my sister and things like that just cuz like kind of what you were saying about people from the outside when you're in public like at a mall or like at a movie theater it's just like when because I think both like all three like my sister and your brother and sister it's kind of like when you look at them you can kind of tell some things like oh like you don't know versus like people who are like higher functioning where you can't quite as tell as much there is a disability
For sure. Yeah.
and it's definitely a like not like a double take thing but you definitely get it's more noticeable to the outside world than if you just kind of look normal and had like more of a mental disability and so I remember
Right.
my my very close friends understand that whole element but when I just meet new people or we just go to restaurants it's just like whatever like you kind of just roll with the punches a little bit it kind of just
No, for sure.
yeah
Yeah. And like, like, I mean, I don't know about um, your sister or anything, but I know like, my siblings aren't sometimes the most quietest in public spaces. And, like certain things like, like you don't like, make noises in public, it's not like something that you normally do, but like they don't understand that necessarily. Um, but and I don't know if you experienced this at all. I'm sure you have, and I'm sure probably everyone has as a typical
mm-hmm.
sibling, but like it's also the aspect of you grow up so fast, and you kind of, in a sense, like, your world kind of revolves around your siblings. I had
Yeah.
super cool parents, and like my parents, it wasn't in the sense of like, they were solely focused on my siblings and didn't really care about us. Like, they made a point to, you know, spend one-on-one time with us and talk to us. But like, no matter how good or wonderful your parents are, they'll never understand what it's like to be a typical sibling unless they were
Right.
one themselves. And
Yep.
even then, it's different in this time, or like in this, I guess, culture, to be a typical sib than it was, when maybe they were a typical sib.
Mhm.
Um, but like, I definitely found it hard sometimes to talk with, some of my friends when they are asking you all these different questions, and you're like trying to talk with them, but like, in a sense, you don't really necessarily have too much to offer because your whole life is spent with your sibling. And so there's definitely moments where it was kind of like, oh, like, how was your week, or what did you do, and you're like, not really anything worth mentioning because you're not going to understand. But
Yeah, or even like the inverse when my friends would come back from like the summer, they're like, "Oh, I went on this cruise," or like, "I went to these vacations." And I was like, "I
yeah,
was at home with my family because we can't go on vacation." Like you can, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
for
I
sure,
never
yeah,
understood. Yeah, every time my friends would come back, I'm like, "That's cool. Don't know what that's like, but I was here going to like day camps and stuff, so that's fine."
yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. So in terms of okay, there's lots of challenges because we've already talked about them and stuff like that. But I mean, are there anything that kind of challenges that in particular stick out to you that really kind of like either shaped your character or really just kind of like had you, um, like really bond with your siblings or your parents or anything like that, in particular?
I mean, I think like the biggest ongoing challenge, at least for me, is the aspect of, just, like, our culture is just so bent, even now, more and more bent on like what you look like on the outside and stuff, and not as much what you are inside, which
Mm-hmm.
is really what matters. And so I think that just is constantly like the hardest thing for me, and because I know who my siblings are on the inside, and they might kind of on the outside seem weird, or make weird noises or weird faces or whatever, or do weird things, but on the inside, like, they truly care about people. And like, just like simple things, like my sister will sit outside on the sidewalk when all the high schoolers are going by, and she'll like say hi to them. And for some
Aw.
reason, she like seems to know when someone's having a bad day, because sometimes we'll have like the older people walk by, because we have like this senior living place nearby my parents' house.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see it as much anymore because I don't live with my parents anymore. But um, when I used to, she would sit out there, and she would say hi to everyone, but there would be specific people that she would go up to and then just give them a hug. And like
Aw.
most of the time, they would either like start crying, or they would like say like thank you. You could tell like that really meant something. So like, I don't know
How,
if
wow, how'd
it's
she do
someone.
that? That's amazing.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the Down syndrome characteristic, if they can just see that, or some, maybe God gave her that gift or something, where she can just tell when someone needs something. But
Yeah.
um, it's like that kind of stuff. But I think, going back to your question about a hard thing, that would probably the hardest thing for me, and just like wishing that people could see that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think if I had to pick something as well that would like kind of like groom me, and maybe grew me closer to my parents, and my other siblings, is the like, just, I think, more of the trials, in a sense. So like,
Mm-hmm.
both of my siblings have health characteristics. My sister specifically has a lot, and there was like one big one that we didn't really know of when we adopted her, that her, I believe, trachea, or where she like breathed, was the size of like a newborn, and it never really grew. And
Okay.
so there was a point when she ended up just like having a lot of breathing issues, and then we ended up taking her to the hospital, or I guess like the ER nearby us, where she like technically, quote unquote, died like three times, where her heart stopped and they had to restart, and they would stop and then
Oh
restart it.
man, that's crazy.
And then she ended up going to Lucille Packard up in Stanford,
Mm-hmm.
for like 3 months, and they just did a bunch of stuff. And so like, with that whole experience, and like kind of just like, I don't know, going through that with my siblings and then my parents, we kind of like leaned on each other. I mean, we definitely like, prayed a lot through that. But even just like leaning on each other because there was times when certain of us couldn't like get through the day, and so like people that were a little bit stronger would
Mm.
kind of help support them or vice versa.
Yeah.
And then specifically as well, not to pick on my my sister, but she also definitely has a knack for escaping, and she just has like no fear,
Yes.
except for like more recently we've begun to realize that she does have like some fears. For instance, like she gets scared of dogs for some reason.
Oh, my sister
But
too. She's
oh
terrified
really?
of them. All dogs, big, small, doesn't
All
matter. Like,
dogs?
yeah.
It was funny though, because she used to like never seem scared of anything, but you know, um, but there's definitely been some moments like at church, like all of a sudden we couldn't find her, and so we spent like 45 minutes like scouring the neighborhoods,
Mhm.
called 911. There was the time, which I'm sure like when you talk to my sister, she could probably tell you from her point of view, but
Mhm.
where my sister got out and ended up walking in the middle of the street down like the main street off our house, and
Yeah.
my sister was coming home from work and it was like all backed up, and she ended up finding her just standing in the middle of the street.
Oh
And
man.
then like we got woken up in the middle of the night by a knock on the door from the police who said they found her wandering around at night. And
Yeah.
then, being woken up at 4 in the morning saying we can't find her, and then like running around in my bare feet, like all of the neighborhood trying to find her. And I think specifically the one part that like sticks out the most to me, I think, um, was that particular moment and the fact that, I don't know. I think that was kind of when I was kind of going through a moment in my own life, um, and like not like super close with God, and just kind of like I guess resenting, not like resenting in a sense, but kind of more um, not super close with my siblings with special needs, and just kind of like
Mhm.
going through my own stuff. And then
Yeah.
I got woken up at like I think it was like 4 in the morning or whatever from my sister who said we couldn't find her. So I started running around the neighborhood, and I was like running over like an overpass, kind
Oh
of where
man.
she liked to go.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then
Mhm.
there was like a neighborhood below, and there was like some accident or something. And there was a bunch of like cop cars all over the thing. And I like started panicking, like, what if that's her down there?
Oh
And then,
shoot.
I think I spent like 20, 30 minutes running around. And I finally got to like the end of my rope and just like broke down crying and like
Yeah.
praying that we would find her. And I don't usually cry. So that was kind of like, I don't know, kind of just like sat down on the sidewalk in my bare feet. I probably like ended up on like our next door, chat for some crazy guy or something. But then like I think I'm not sure if I had my phone on me or if I ended up just walking. I didn't have my phone, so I ended up walking back home, and then um, they had already found her, and basically like I think they had found her like a minute or two after I had like broken down crying and praying that we would find her. And
Mm.
so that like made me realize that like God does really care for her and does watch over her even when we can't. Um, and so
Yeah.
like that definitely brought me closer. And I mean, there's like lots of other things too, but with all those things, I think just realizing that I don't know, when either of my siblings are going
Yeah.
to, die, and knowing that there's plenty of times when they could have and they haven't, and so just like cherishing each moment with them, and like, really taking that moment when it might be annoying because I'm trying to do work, but my little brother comes over and wants to give me a big hug. Like just like cherishing those moments because you don't really know. If anything, I learned from my siblings, it's like cherish each moment because you don't really know, you know, when
Yeah.
anything can happen.
I
So
think, and they're
sorry, that was
unpredictable too.
oh for sure. Sorry, that was kind of a long-winded.
Oh no, it's all good. That's why we just go with the flow. And I mean, like, I definitely appreciate like you sharing all of that because it's definitely something that like unless if you're with other siblings, like they're not gonna understand that, right? Because just like
Yeah.
the level of like how much yeah, the level of how much big of a deal that is. Because like my sister also, well, she doesn't escape. She used to run away a lot in terms of like
Okay.
within our mile radius. She would just like to bolt. So the
Hmm.
thing that was super scary was oh man. So there was one time, so she was like at her like adult day program, and somehow don't know how this happened. So she got lost. Like whoever like her partners and stuff, like they lost her like downtown.
Oh
And
man.
so my mom gets this phone call, right, that like they can't find her. And it's just like, okay, like I don't,
Oh,
right? And my sister, she's nonverbal, right? Like
yeah.
there's no hopes in the like, oh, that she would go up to like, I'm gonna go to a store and say I'm lost. Like there, it was, yeah. So that was a full on like panic thing, and like I remember at the time, like I don't even remember how I felt at all, but I remember just looking at my mom was the most distraught, and then there was my
Yeah.
dad, and there's me. Then like, then we're like deciding like, okay, how in the world do you find her, right? Because it's like, which bus
Yeah.
were they on? Where were they going? Like, would she get off of the bus and whatever? And so it was this weird thing. Like, as her sister, in my gut, I was like, I know she won't go anywhere that she's not like familiar with. Like she would have got off the bus, or like, or she would just kind of go to places she knew. And I don't know why I thought that, but like I just know that she wouldn't randomly just like be somewhere. And so
Yeah.
but that was, it was so crazy. And I remember like what, and it was crazy how someone found her, because basically my aunt, who we had called, shortly after that, so she had posted on Facebook like, hey, like a picture of my sister, and like, hey, like this is where they were, and blah blah blah. And
Yeah.
so someone that like had not talked to my aunt in years, like we all just kind of mutually knew each other. So she had saw my aunt's post and then was at the bus stop, saw my sister like sitting on a bench, like with her hands folded in her lap, and like
Oh,
found
wow.
her. And we were like, that's so crazy though, right? Because that's such like
Yeah.
a, yeah, because that's such like a guardian angel god provision thing. Because it's like there's no way that like, and nothing happened to her, right? She wasn't like covered. She wasn't like attacked by a dog. She wasn't like hurt. She was just literally sitting there, like just hanging on a bench. And
No, for sure.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, but it's yeah, but nothing beats that type of terror in your heart of like what could
No,
happen.
yeah,
It's yeah.
it's kind of like if it's like I mean, I don't want to speak for other parents or anything, but like
Right.
it's almost I feel like in a sense like you kind of feel like that's your own kid, like the type of fear I guess that a parent would have if like their kid runs away. You kind of feel as a typical sib in a sense, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we all kind of grow up as
But
like mini parents, kind of.
for
Especially, well,
sure.
and you're the oldest too, right? So you have like your regular siblings that you already take care of like on
Yeah,
a regular basis, and then you have like your special needs sibling like
right.
on top of that. No, yeah, that's
Yeah.
crazy. Is there anything that you would tell like your younger self and like interacting with your special needs siblings, or just like approaching life or anything like that, that you would like, hey, if you could write a letter to yourself when you were younger?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like more just geared toward myself because I'm kind of a certain type of weird, but um I think like I would tell myself that it's one of those things where it's gonna be really hard. Like there's gonna be moments, where you are just gonna have a really rough time, whether that's like, angry at your siblings for something, angry at the world, angry at a friend, angry at a family member. Cause, I love my family, but I'm not gonna like name drop or anything, but we have certain
Yeah.
like family members, not necessarily in our immediate family, but like,
Mm,
grandparents, cousins, uncles, aunts, whatever,
yeah.
that don't understand and, like will say something, do something to my siblings where I just get like, all like angry at them.
Yeah.
But like, it's not like they're trying to, they just don't understand, in a sense. But but yeah, if I could like write a letter, I'd just probably say something along the lines of like, there's gonna be definitely moments, where it's going to be really hard, but it's also going to be equally, if not more, rewarding. You know, and you're
Mm-hmm.
going to learn so much about yourself, and in a sense, be able to offer more to the world because of growing as a person than you would have if you didn't experience that. And then I think another thing, and this is just more geared towards myself. I don't know if there's other typical sibs out there that have the same thing, but I really
Mm-hmm.
struggle with like sharing my feelings. I'm definitely much more of like an internal processor. And so, when
Mm-hmm.
I go through hard things, I just like internalize it and just like, I'm like, I don't want to share it. I'll be happy to listen to you and like pray with you and like listen to your stuff. I'm not about to share my own stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's like one thing that I'm working on trying to get better at. And so I think I would just be something along the lines of like, it's to anyone out there that has the same thing, and to myself, if I was like younger, like it's make sure it's very important to have, a foundation of people that you feel comfortable sharing those kind of things with.
Yeah.
Like hard things, whether that's a parent, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think it's good to share with your parents, but I also think it's good to have either a really good friend or two with which, even if they don't necessarily have a typical sieve, but like they are such a good friend in this, or like a something of special needs. Sorry, but like either a really good friend that understands that kind of stuff, that you've been through a lot and that kind of stuff, or just like
Mm-hmm.
another, one or two, a group of typical sibs, which I think has really helped me in a sense, because I do have my siblings, and we understand. We've had moments where we talk about certain things. For instance, like one particular thing that me and like both of my sisters have like discussed more recently is that the
Mm-hmm.
fear that all of us have as our parents are getting older, and
Yes.
our siblings don't really seem like they're outgrowing certain things that they have. If anything, they're getting worse. And so,
Mm-hmm.
the aspect of like, what would it look like, if my our dad or our mom were to pass away suddenly, or if they were to lose a job and not able to provide, or
Yeah.
what if both of them were to pass away, or like whatever, like what would that look like for us, for our careers, if we were like married, like for our family, and just like the aspect of
Mm-hmm.
it's not like you're just getting married to someone and being like, oh, like here's myself. It's like, well, here's my whole family, and more than
Yeah.
likely, if my parents die, we're going to
It's
be
very
taking care of this
different.
person too.
Yes.
And so we've been talking a lot about that. So long story short, just like having um you know a group of, whether if you're like yourself, if you are an only child, like having another typical sib, or a group, or a really good friend that you can talk to that stuff about, that would like
Yeah.
listen and pray for you and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's crazy, and it's been interesting, like in well, I guess just as I've gotten to be an adult, it's been interesting to see like the friends that I have that I kind of like, oh, like we're good friends and like we can talk about stuff versus like the people who like really understand the struggle of stuff I have to go through. And some of them I've just been friends with so long that they've met my sister, or
Right.
they're the fortunate few that actually slept over, like with all the like permissions and
Hmm.
stuff that come with that. And then even with my husband, like I remember like when we were dating, like I had spent a good amount of time like explaining to him like it's not just me. And even when I was dating and
Yeah.
like before we got married, I was pretty like it's such a deal breaker. Like it is not like a hey, I really like broccoli and you don't, so like we'll get over it. Like it's like if you can't accept this as like who I am, like it can't happen. Like
Yeah.
it's so much of who we are. It's you can't trade that or like give any of that up. So it I feel like it makes it harder. At the same time, it's like the kind of the what you were saying about like it being rewarding at the end, right? Because then when you find someone that really is willing to accept that, unfortunately, like my
Yeah.
husband, it's very like he loves my sister more than I could ever think of, and it's so funny because they have like their own relationship, which is so
Hmm.
fascinating to me, right? Just because I'm so used to the like, oh, there's me, the sisters, there's my parents, and then there's like everyone else, like aunts, uncles, grandparents, blah blah blah. But I'm like, but their relationship is so unique because he like she didn't see him as part of our unit, but she knows that he's part of our unit now, and
Hmm.
like it's so cool just because yeah they have like their own thing, and that's really
Yeah.
special just for me to be able to see it. And at the same time it's like the the fear of like whatever happens to our parents and stuff is like it's crazy. And like unfortunately you have more than one sibling to kind of like figure it out. It's just me, so it's this thing where
Yeah.
my parents like and it's crazy because it's like you talk about it when I think like comparatively to normal people, like we talk about it at a pretty young age. Like
Hmm.
when you're like, early 20s or whatever, that's when you start talking about, cuz basically once your siblings hit kind of like like 16, 18, that's when it starts to, you have to, you know, what is that called? Plan ahead, and it kind of gets
Yeah.
very intense. Yeah. But I guess, is there anything else you wanted to bring up that like came into your memory? Otherwise, we can then I'll ask you like our closing thing, if you had some like light bulb moment.
Hmm. Trying to think. I honestly can't really necessarily think of anything. I mean, I could honestly share a lot of like stories, hard moments, good moments, things like that, things where, I learned more about myself or I learned more about my sibling, but that could take a while. But I think if I were to like, I guess summarize my experiences and like my life with my siblings, it would be
Mm.
the fact that like, everyone talks about, I feel like for the most part, like how scary it is to have someone with special needs. And like my mom, I know specifically, but my dad as well, gets so annoyed when like other parents come up to them and they're like, man, you're just such an amazing person. Like,
Yeah,
God must have
yeah. My mom
gifted
too.
you with
She hates
patience.
it.
And yeah. And my mom's like,
Yep.
no, like, like God, like I'm just a normal person. Like, if anything, like I'm not like some superhuman, thing. But I think, in a sense, people like look at it like it's like some big, I don't know, obstacle, or you're just some superhuman person. But in reality, that's not the case. And I think if I were to kind of like, I guess, summarize what I've learned, it's that if anything, it's more of a blessing to have someone with special needs than it is to not.
Mm.
Because like you just learn so much about yourself. And like I'm still like convinced that like God gives people with special needs like special gifts that like no one else has.
Yes.
Like it's
Yeah.
only like specifically geared towards people with special needs. And so, you know, the idea that I get to like experience that on a daily basis and get to like learn from them and like see how they see the world and see other people. I don't know. It's a really cool thing. And so I think just, for any other like typical sib out there, or for anyone that like is, maybe just learn that like they're going to adopt someone, or that their mom or is like pregnant with someone or whatever, like they're going to become one, that it is a really cool thing. And like yeah, it'll be hard along the way, but like I said earlier, like the good things will definitely outweigh the bad in it. And
Yes. Yeah.
I would say it would definitely be good to surround yourself with people that you can share with, and that can pray for you and all that kind of stuff as well, because that's definitely very important, I feel like. And having definitely a strong relationship with God as well, because
Yeah.
not to like scare anyone or anything, but it's not like it's going to be easy, like I mean, there's going to be
No,
definitely
it's
like
not.
moments, you
It's
know
yeah.
but yeah, anyway, I honestly I can't think of anything at the top of my head of anything else to share. um
Cool. And that's
yeah.
all good. I'll ask you like we talked about a lot of good things, and I definitely appreciate as an internal processor sharing sharing external thoughts. So I definitely
Oh sure,
appreciate you
yeah.
taking the time to do that. So I guess as our closing question, are there any words of encouragement that you would like to give to our fellow siblings listening to the podcast?
Yeah, words of encouragement, I would just say like you know if other people haven't already, I feel like I'm kind of like being redundant and saying it, but like definitely like find a community, because like I know there's definitely moments in my own life when I felt like just kind of like there's no one that like would understand. There's no one out there, like just kind of like alone. But like at least I have my siblings. But like even having siblings, it's like we all like process things differently,
Mm-hmm.
and like we all have different interactions or different things with our siblings than each other. And so, each person's different. But I think just like, knowing that you're not alone out there, and that, there are other people out there that are just like you, that are, honestly like looking for people to share with. And so, um, you know,
Yeah.
just praying about it. But I do think, having a good relationship with God too definitely helps, because you know I definitely needed that over the years. And like spending time like praying about certain things and things like that have definitely been helpful. But yeah, I think if anything, just knowing that, you're not alone. It's not just you out there in the abyss, going through this hard thing, that there's actually, people out there that are going through the same thing. Um, and not to like make downplay where you are, but I'm sure there's people out there that are even going through harder things than you're going through. Because I know there's people that are going through harder things than I'm going through.
Yeah.
Because I can think of, friends of mine that, are typical sibs that, don't have a father because their father left, or, like things like that.
Yeah.
And so I think that just brings a whole nother level of stuff that I don't understand myself personally. But yeah, just like knowing that you're not alone, and that, there are people out there, and, there is someone out there, who does care for you, and who does see you. And yeah, like, you're not I would tend to say, I don't think that necessarily our siblings with special needs are out there like looking to embarrass us. You know what I mean? I don't think they're out there,
I don't think so
and
either. That is not their intention at
plotting,
all.
yeah, plotting and like, how can I embarrass myself? I think, my sister is a practical jokester, so she'll do certain things, you know, that I might, get embarrassed about, but she just thinks it's funny. And like, looking back on it, I'm like, honestly, if this was someone else doing it to me, I would think it's funny. It's just that maybe in the moment I'm like, well, it's someone else, and I just feel embarrassed about it more than I should. But they're not out there to,
No, yeah, their personalities definitely. The older they get, the more they come out, and the more like you realize, like, oh, like they're like there's a part of them that's just they're like normal like us, like where they just like to play practical jokes and make fun of people and laugh and like talk, and it's just they're
yeah,
like being normal people, but just like with a filter of a lot of other things kind of in their way, getting in
for
their way
sure,
from them doing it. Yeah,
for sure,
no, my
yeah. And I
my
think,
sister's so funny.
yeah, yeah, no, and like, kind of like piggybacking off of what you said, if like there's anything that I could summarize it in, like, I guess, like one sentence of everything I've learned, and like encouragement for other people, it would just be like, to live, like, kind of like more like day by day, like each moment, and really just enjoy each moment. As I think that's one of the biggest thing that I probably learned from my siblings, because they've been through a lot themselves, and I know that they see other people out there, probably my brother more than my sister,
Mm-hmm.
people who don't like include them, or who talk behind their back.
Yeah.
I know they can see that, but yet they still like choose to love those people. And so I think just, um, the biggest thing is just for me is like, I guess, living each moment, and really just being in the moment, and forgiving easily, and laughing a lot, you
Yes,
know.
I vote for laugh a
So
lot too. That's
yes.
so helpful and so important, and especially when like building community with people, and just like when you're sharing with your friends, and just being able to laugh at stuff, even though it like
No,
kind of makes you sad on the inside. Like that's such a big it's such a big helper to be able to laugh.
for sure. And I know, like, for me, like, there are some people that I know, um, some families that I used to look up to and idolize, because I just thought that they, seemed like they had everything, like, specifically the kids, like, oh man, they just, I don't know, they get to do all the cool family summer adventures, and like they like
Yeah.
just seem like
Yep.
whatever. And then like I've talked to them, and like realized that, like, not only did they idolize me, but like they wish that they had the kind of family that I did, where, we just love each other so much. And like realizing that, how in reality there are so many people out there that, might seem like they're making fun, or seem like they have it all together, but deep down inside it's not the case. And just how
Mm-hmm.
good I have it, and how, my siblings with special needs themselves, and just like encouraging me to be more like them, encourage other people. Because I've had so many people, and my parents, and I'm sure my siblings could say the same thing, of people coming up to them and saying, like, why are you like that, or like, why do you always seem so happy, or why do you seem like you have it all
Yeah.
together, you
Yep.
know so anyway, yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for being on the podcast. I definitely
Hey,
appreciate it.
absolutely, can't wait
Yeah.
to hear all the different stories from people.
Thanks for listening to the Special Needs Sibling Podcast. I hope you had a good time listening and feel encouraged in your own journey as a sibling to someone with special needs. If you liked this episode, please share it with your friends. And if you want to hear more stories, please subscribe to the show. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, the show can't happen without you. All special needs siblings have their own unique stories, challenges, family dynamics, and lots of life to talk about and explore. This podcast is here to let you know that you're not alone and that you matter. If you would like to be on the show or just chat off the record, please contact me. My info is in the show notes. Until next time, this is the Special Needs Sibling Podcast.